step in. First, I want to thank you both. It was incredibly generous, and I feel very lucky that most artists don't have the opportunity to have someone look that closely and talk about their work, so thank you. On that note, I feel like the hysteric tonight. That's a little anxious, not remembering much, and really wishes I brought a pencil, even though I've been to enough panels that I know I should have, but you were much more prepared than I am for this. So the way that I was kind of hoping to approach the next part of this, if you two were, was that we were going to mostly have a conversation.
Right. Maybe I could start off with the question that I asked you when you were up front. I'm very interested to know how this exhibit came into being and what the process was that you went through from some intimation of something to how it, stages it went through to be what it is today.
Again, I'll answer it as clearly as I can, but I'm sort of hysteric in the studio as well. I generally start with a title, so Hysterionics and the Forgotten Art was the first thing that came.
And this just came out of nowhere? Or?
No, there's usually a transition between bodies of work, and I kind of make a lot of bad things and keep my hands busy and do a lot of research. And also as a token to those of you for not maybe being as articulate as I'd like to be today, I have a research blog called Up Like Toast on Blogspot that basically is where I keep all of my research and my random thoughts. And then at some point, that title came into play. And so I can't even name when exactly, but when it did, I kind of jumped on that. There's also usually a transition. The work has always been about the idea of anomalies and society, or who kind of stands on what side of society, that we accept people or don't accept people. And it's always, since undergraduate, kind of started from that, but it hopefully has gotten better and more involved. And so each body of work kind of infers the next body. And the previous body of work was Victorian children. So these are kind of my teenage and 20-year-old girls. And also as young women, they're also standing up for themselves more than the children did, so I think that's where the boxing comes in. But also the play of Victoriana comes in there. And then the last thing I'd say about that, and then if there's any follow-up questions, is that this is about 2 years worth of work. And the majority of it happened at a residency called Bemis in Omaha. And so even though none of them are here, a huge shout out to Bemis. For the time, mostly it's a 3-month residency that I made an awful lot of really bad work that dealt with these ideas. And all of this work came out of that bad work over the summer. So the cabinet cards are probably the only things that started 2 years ago and have continued through. And the rest of the work is standing on the ruins of that original work.
Margaret, can you talk a little bit about what made it bad? Why was that work? Why did you deem that work bad? And what was it?
It was bad. For me personally, it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't visually. I kind of deal on 2 levels. I'm a real formalist, even though I don't know if that, I think it's seen in this body of work, but the work that I originally made was incredibly excessive and decorative, and I think that I was able to kind of have my fit and regurgitate everything I thought about, and then I had to start to edit, and that's where this came from. So I also took a lot of challenges for that residency because I knew nobody was really looking, and I worked with materials on a scale that I'd never worked on. So a lot of things were unsuccessful just because I didn't have the skills, and also because I realized maybe things didn't need to be so big or over the top. I actually built an 8-foot boxing ring there. It was horrible. It was really, really bad. And I love just the circle on the floor now. So.
struck by something you said, Dr. Adler, about histrionics being a form of communication. Because until you said that, I really only thought of it as a kind of expression, kind of just jettisoning of whatever emotional content. But it was really interesting to hear you use the term a communication to try and exchange something with someone. I wondered if you could speak to that, Margaret, and how much of it is a specific communication and how much of it is pure expression.
In terms of the actual artworks, or in terms of the character, the pugilist?
The artwork.
I think it's all there. Is that? I don't know if I know the question, Catherine. I'm sorry.
Well, the idea that it being a communication, because I always think of it, histrionics is just random shouting and waving your arms and not necessarily trying to get a message across, but you're obviously moving towards getting a message across here. So I'm just wondering where one leaves off and the other begins, where expression
Well, and I
leads
think
into
that hysteria, or that is a desperation of trying to communicate on a certain level, or to be heard. Especially, I was really happy to hear a lot of the references, but the references of the women that were institutionalized, the photographs that were taken. I collect a lot of crazy things. Some people think, I don't. But some of those, and actually there's a book, if you guys know the artist Peter Whitkin, he actually put together a book that collects in 3 sections: mugshots, institutionalized women in insane asylums, and crime shots, which is a really, and when I was in graduate school, you had to ask for it. It was behind the counter. But those women, I feel like when you look at some of those pictures, some of the women clearly aren't there. Like, you can see it, but some of them are very much there, and they're trapped in a situation that in another time and space they may not be in those institutions. So possibly that communication, or that sense of communication in hysteria and histrionics, and me combining those 2 words for the title, is definitely about that. And also the layers of it through a visual language, what some people may pull out and some people may not pull out.
I think there's a difference between histrionics and hysteria, and that may be, and not that that's a difference that your work necessarily maintains, a separation between the 2, but I think it might be something to keep in mind as you think of it, that histrionics may be less communication of a specific nature, and rather a communication of an attempt to communicate, whereas hysteria and the hysterical symptoms, track down to their endpoint in the unconscious, do communicate something specifically, specific to an individual history, an individual experience.
But I think an expression, I don't know that there is an expression without at some level there being a receiver. And there may not be a specifically, as Gemma was saying, formed message that is being communicated. In fact, the subject may not even know what they're communicating, but rather it's somebody in their mind or an audience or something. I think there needs to be a receiver of an expression. And I think of, and I also think it's relevant that Charcot's subjects, one of the things that these women who would take these very odd poses where they appeared to be paralyzed or contorted or in an epileptic fit, it turned out that they were really very, very suggestible, and they were acting something out that was being suggested to them. So there was very much a communication that was going back and forth between the observer and the hysterical subject.
And there were favored hysterics who would be trotted out, for visiting physicians. So, because they had particularly good poses.
Reliable.
Right, exactly. Let's bring Anna over.